This is a story that starts with death. A stranger's, leaving behind what could mistakenly be thought his. The name, Sasaki Kojiro. But this is also a story that starts with rebirth, Jisai's. A man defeated by the sword when the sword was his life, and so ready to wither away along the ocean. His life as trivial as its foam. But a miracle was on its way, carried by the might and terror of a stormy sea. A gift not from the heavens, but the ocean itself. While reading Kojiro's prologue, I remember very clearly saying out loud, "This is a masterpiece." The adversities of life, the bond between father and son, and the natural inclination toward the way of the sword as a mean to express what words cannot, all of this must have played a part in having me say that to myself. I think Kojiro's flashback might be one of, if not, my favorite arc in manga. The feeling of being needed, the innocent eyes of a newborn seeing right through him, and Kojiro's attraction to the longsword are all factors that trigger a change in Jisai. And the beauty of his character lies in him constantly doubting himself, in him abandoning Kojiro multiple times at a very patient family, or tossing the sword into the sea only to retrieve it a minute later. In short, his weakness. During the flashback, a certain ambiguous figure keeps popping in and out, each time shaking the course of the story, without declaring clearly his intentions. Ito, destined to play a role as important as Jisai's. And even though seen hostile from his former master, he has no ill will, and actually, he's the one to make Jisai notice Kojiro's deafness. This is surely one of the most painful and crucial moments in the prologue, as Jisai is devastated by learning about Kojiro's handicap. And it is so well portrayed by him bringing Kojiro at the beach and seeing him unflinch to the roaring waves crashing, or yelling at him and having no response other than Kojiro making weird faces, thinking it a game. This only further pains Jisai, realizing that all the conversations he'd had with Kojiro, he was only really talking to himself, and so, as if attacking the sea could do anything, he starts swinging the longsword against the waves, with Kojiro imitating him at a distance. But this is not the path Jisai has decided for him, since it was the sword that led Kojiro to someone such as him. It was by the sword that his parents perished. Kojiro should survive and live a decent life, not one where death is such a premature possibility. A contrast that is often brought up during the flashback is Kojiro's purity and the village's maliciousness, as seen by their mocking faces and Kojiro misinterpreting. Yet again, thinking it an innocent game, or with them rejecting Jisai, trying to desperately find a job or begging for food, unknowingly under Kojiro's eyes. Orin's family and Kenji are the only exceptions, and it feels like whenever the village can, it will behave in a miserable way. As it happens with everybody starting to take swordsmanship lessons from Sensei Jisai, no longer the old coot, only after Fudo's death, where moreover they beat his dead body. I feel like when making a deaf character, you're definitely restricting and challenging yourself as an author because of the more limited way to express him. But at the same time, Kojiro is a character that, forced to live in a world with no sound, has had only his body to listen to. And his language is the sword, a mean to communicate, to express himself, a way to live that invigorates him. If I think about it, I come to believe more and more that Jisai is trying to make Kojiro live a life that he would have wanted to live at this point, somewhat limiting him despite his potential, one with no regrets and blood. But at the same time, as noticed by Ito, Kojiro is a tiger that should not be raised to be a house cat. After all, samurai blood runs through his veins, and the sword is his natural inclination, a substitute for his lost parents. And years go by fast, with the ocean looking ever more beautiful for Jisai. Master Fudo is a simple yet great villain. The way he casually walks up to Jisai on their first encounter, as if drunk, yet very aware and alert, his menacing deep scars distorting the skin of his body, his incomprehensible mumbling, sometimes leaving room to sentences with actual sense, while still only really whispering to himself, and his sense of smell, almost picking up orins so pervertedly. Everything contributes to making him disturbing despite his calmness. Something that in particular Jisai cannot keep, and it's depicted so well in his breathing stopping from fear, or his inability to get drunk to face him. It's all coherent to the weakness of his character, that is here taken advantage of by the village in convincing him behind money to take on Fudo, and sending him as cannon fodder, exploited by the chief knowing about his poverty, and linked to Jisai's will to educate and raise Kojiro properly. Jisai feels like a real person during his march to Fudo's shack, vomiting and constantly doubting his decision, which is basically a death sentence, but unable to back down because of his sensitivity. A character constantly going out of his way to aid others when he could simply not. Which reminds me of when he, in vain, decided to painfully take back out this sword to hopefully earn from giving swordsmanship lessons. The fight sequence is decorated by flames in the background, contrasting the darkness of the night, while a secret is unveiled. It's not Kojiro, but Kenji to die in the future, as told by his scars. And here Kojiro is reminded of what Takuan had taught him in the past, that death and fear of it are part of the sword, as represented by the longsword, supposedly too heavy for a kid, suddenly regaining its original weight on the taste of Fudo's blood, that, though a villain, is able to show mercy to his young challengers. But the most interesting part about him has to be that he might have gone under a different name in the past, more renowned, to be able to wield such a heavy weapon in one hand. It's a nice little detail that adds depth to him. An encounter definitely destined to leave the mark and nightmares, but fundamental for Kojiro's future, which is in Ito's hands, with his vision inevitably prevailing and having Kojiro embracing the way of this sword. While also intertwining the story of other characters, setting up future events, the final act of the flashback passes the torch to Ito, acting as Kojiro's new mentor, and for me, the sweetest detail has to be the reassurance of Kojiro departing of his own free will, as proven by him leaving his dear longsword behind. But most importantly, this last part concludes Jisai's story, relieving him of all his life's regrets due to this sword, upon realizing that it was indeed the sword to let Kojiro befriend Shichiro, just as it did with Kenji, fondly binding them, a passion to which Jisai relates. And it was the sword that led Kojiro to him, the sword that let him leave behind a swordsman such as Sasaki Kojiro.